Hello, everyone. Ted Clayton here. I believe that Casanova was a targeted individual. For those that may not be aware, Casanova was a real person whose name was Giacomo Casanova. Around the they were around in the 15th, 16th century. Their contemporaries were Voltaire, Mozart, and Goethe. So to give people a little bit of an idea of the backdrop, who this person was, and the time and place that they were in. Now, normally, I don't do topics on targeted individuals. There are people that are better at articulating the whole concept about being a targeted individual, their stories, analysis, and theories. I focus on other things. I never felt the need to focus on being a targeted individual or targeted individuals. However, when I see something that no one's talked about, or a conclusion that I may come to, which in this case is what happened here, then I'll share I share my thoughts and then just leave it out there for discussion. But for those in the targeted individual community, I think you guys will find this interesting. The purpose of me creating this video is for academic purposes. For those in academia, I'm sure most are aware that Casanova was an influential person in their time. And yes, we know them as a ladies' man, but there was more to him. And that's also another reason why they've been in the public consciousness. They were just such a well-known person for ages, centuries. For those in academia, and anyone else that aren't aware of targeted individuals, the definition is pretty much there in the term, but to give a more stronger one, it's basically, essentially, anyone that is a threat to the perception of reality, or the reality that's imposed by the powers that be. And this is fundamentally on a societal, psychological, and spiritual, and for those that may not want to delve into spirituality, on a more ontological level. And as, again, people that are academics may understand, a person that was so influential, it starts to kind of click why they were such a threat. So how I came about this conclusion was from editing audiobooks. I was an audiobook editor for some time, for over 10 years. I've worked with some of the biggest companies, including Audible, Talking Book Productions, which used to get contracts from the National Library of Congress. So I've been doing audiobooks for some time, and again, been with some reputable brands. I came across this book, and while doing it, this is the conclusion I came to. Now, in general, but also given with that premise, any information, any details or any holes, please forgive me with. Please share any corrections, or again, if there's any gaps that I may leave. It's been some time since I worked on the book, but also when one edits an audiobook, at least for myself, it's difficult to consume the actual content of the book because one is focusing on their work, on editing the actual words and proofreading. So I will get the gist of the book, and I would say it's pretty much comparable to reading the book, but it may be some details, me personally, some details I may forget because I'm so focused on editing, or sometimes I just get locked in and block out the book and just edit. and just look at the actual words. But this is the conclusion I came to, and I worked on this book, as I said, a long time ago, and I noticed it right then and there. But I wanted to think about this. Yeah, it took some time to put this video together, but I wanted to really think about this and go over my thoughts before I put this out there. So a little history. Casanova was from the upper class. I would like to say lower upper class. I had to go on Wikipedia. Again, as I said, I forgot. Well, let me just pull up the book while I continue. So the book that I was working on, it was called Casanova, The World of a Seductive Genius by Lawrence Bergreen. Here's the cover of the book from Amazon. All right. I thought it was actually a pretty good book. I would say he was from the lower upper class. His parents were actors. And I just read this thing not too long ago, so I already forgot that a little bit. But his parents, he was from the lower upper class. He was involved in the church. And this is, I wouldn't say this is when he started to become more confrontational or started to question a lot of things, but this was definitely a big obstacle. He was removed from the church, I believe, for questioning some of the concepts at that time. I believe his biggest thing was marriage in the church. And I think that got him into trouble. So that's one thing. He was a Renaissance man, a writer, involved in the sciences, medicine, I believe, as well, just a little bit, and in the arts as well. But overall, he was a socialite. And that's really just, I think that term right there gives a little more context, a clarity into why this person would be a threat. And Casanova wasn't, if I remember correctly, wasn't involved in any specific circle or attached to any specific person. They were just in many different circles. Which can be a threat in and of itself, because one can be a socialite attached to one person. Let's say, for example, someone that comes to mind is Kim Kardashian, who was with Paris Hilton, was just like her buddy for a long time. But then you have somebody who's just kind of around in many different places. Now, women. Just to kind of put that out the way. Yes, people were, as we would say, jealous of him. So that is going to naturally bring feelings of contempt towards a person. But again, bringing back this idea of him being a socialite, it's sometimes the particular woman that he's involved with. It may be a powerful woman. There's one story towards the end of the book where he was trying to hook up with this woman who was royalty. I forgot what country, what was her title, but again, I think he had disguised himself as a chef or as a waiter to try to hook up with this girl, and it was something like he mapped this out for like months or a couple weeks, and eventually I think he ended up becoming intimate with her. But again, this is just to give an idea of why he was such a threat. Yes, his natural feelings of contempt, but it's also, it could be the person that they were intimate with. What I thought was interesting, what really stuck out to me, was his idea on Freemasonry. And he was a Freemason. Now, I know someone may think already, immediately, especially some people that may be in the targeted individual community, how can someone be a targeted individual and a Freemason at the same time? Well, I particularly never had a monolithic view on the Freemasons. I think that maybe the institution as a whole went astray, but I've met some good people that were Freemasons. I only know one person personally whose family were Freemasons. I We were teenagers at the time, so I think I did ask them if they were. I think they told me something along the lines of they still hadn't made a decision or they have the opportunities there, but I don't think they were. So what he shared was he felt that it was important. He felt it was a good idea for any young man, and I think he said specifically, well, it is for men, excuse me, for any young men to become involved in Freemasonry if they wanted to move up the social ladder or just maintain their position laterally, just to have a strong network, a strong support system. Me knowing my limited understanding, or at least from the outside of Freemasonry and their influence on society, I see how that would make sense. And it may actually be a good idea. And it was actually something that I pondered myself after reading that, more because I was interested in the individual, and I thought that their reasoning made sense. Now, me personally, I'm not interested in joining Freemasonry mainly because I'm a loner, and I don't like the concept of paying dues to acquire knowledge. At the same time, it is a fraternity, so I do understand that. I do have to give that to its credit. At the same time, again, it's a fraternity or institution where it's difficult to leave, and that's something that doesn't really sit well with me, or something that I choose not to do at this time. However, it did make me interested because I do feel that I have some attributes that I can contribute to a fraternity or an institution like that, and vice versa. But again, it's the whole concept of trying to leave and me just being a loner in my my constitution as a person. They were in prison. Casanova was in prison for some time, I believe a few years, at the very least a few months. And where they were in prison, it was a prison called Ipiombi, if I, again, remember that correctly. This was their Italy's, or just at that time, just in the Middle Ages, or just at this time in place, they're equivalent to a federal a federal penitentiary. They did escape. They were going mad, and the thing is, at least in a modern federal penitentiary, there is at least there's a modicum of humanity that's given to prisoners, whereas at that time, the person was just put in this just room, basically a dungeon. The idea that we get, or the notion that we get of prisons at that time does come from places like this. He eventually did escape, but there were people that were authorities that were trying to apprehend Casanova for some time, practically throughout his whole life. So again, this is where I started to come to the conclusion that this person was a targeted individual. You know, having somebody move around in different circles, and from the upper class, more so than anything. I mean, targeted individuals can be anybody from the lower and upper class. But I think it's kind of equal across the board. In my understanding, it's kind of equal across the board how focused people may become on you. But I will put some precedence over someone being in the upper class, and also, again, the circles they were involved with, and the ideas, concepts, things they were challenging. And this actually even goes to women too. They had a lot of concepts a lot of ideas or theories when it came to women that was, I'm going to say unconventional, but definitely not the norm at that time. And again, having a connection, forming connection with women is something that is integral in our society or just as a species. Towards the end of his life, he was poor. I guess poor by upper class standards, but he still was pretty busy. He was a librarian. He still wrote a little bit, but the books really weren't selling, wasn't getting that much attention. So things were basically on the decline, and he also had poor health. But he died an honorable death, not a poor man's death like someone like Mozart. So that is some encouragement for people who are listening in the target individual community. But that's how his life was ended. That's how things ended for him. So that's that. Again, just share my thoughts in conclusion I came to when reading this book. Knowing him as, or now understanding that he wasn't just this seducer of women, but a Renaissance man, someone involved in the church, and an intellectual, it makes sense why that person would be a threat. And again, I wanted to provide a lens in which to now see this person and to look into some of their ideas, some of the things that were going on, to maybe make some more connections, deeper connections into what was happening at that time. Again, with that individual and the framework of what was happening around them and things at that time. Well, that's all. Thanks for listening. Enjoy the rest of your day.